Coming up on the CannaCribs podcast.
Cannabis is capable of being different than anyone has ever seen before or experienced. It's capable of producing terpenes no one's ever smelled before in a cannabis plant. To me, it's all about that. I'm talking to a board member. It's like you find your flavor or whatever. You just want to have that. It's like, no, I want as many different jars of really good weed as I can possibly get my hands on. That's what I want. When they pull down the flower, we can say, okay, we think if we hit a plant with this nutrient package and this lighting spectrum at this stage of growth, that we can amp up its cannabinoid production, or we can impact terpene production a certain way. So we have the ability on site to, again, do all that analysis.
Hey, I'm Nick, creator of CannaCribs and Growers Network, where we have educated millions of people on how to elevate their craft. I have toured some of the largest grow operations, befriended the best growers, and built a network of the top cannabis companies. Join me on this next adventure where I document history with the pioneers shaping the global cannabis industry in real time. Welcome to the CannaCribs podcast. Hey, thanks for watching. Do you want your own episode of CannaCribs? What about up to $20,000 in facility upgrades? Well, my friend, you're in luck. Sign up today for the CannaCribs and Hawthorne Sweepstakes for the chance to win. This sweepstakes ends April 2023, open to U.S. residents excluding Florida and New York, over the age of 21 and currently employed by a licensed facility. You can check out the full sweepstakes rules on the application link below. Best of luck. Welcome back to the CannaCribs podcast. Today's guest needs no introduction. We have Chris Hagedorn at the Hawthorne Gardening company. Let's dive in.
Look, it started, honestly, you go in the Wayback Machine. It started for me going back to, visiting my dad, my grandpa at the office when I was a kid, which is still the office, that is Hawthorne's technically headquartered out of, although most of the people are here in Ohio or kind of spread out across the country. So it started off just growing up around, a consumer lawn and garden business, growing up around Miracle-Gro. When it really started in earnest, though, was, getting out of college, stayed away from the family business for fear of, having a negative impact on the business, which is still something that rattles around in the old head. But yeah, it was 2011 or so that my dad, Jim, who is still the chairman and CEO here, he was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and they asked him sort of a surprise question about the cannabis industry and said, why are you not participating in it? And he said, I have no good reason for you. People are growing plants. We help people grow plants. We should be doing it. At the time, I think it was, national sentiment on this whole topic. The industry was different. Our company was a little bit different, particularly the leadership and kind of board of directors level. So the board came to him at that point and said, look, Jim, we've kind of never told you no. This is the time that we tell you no, we're not getting into the weed business, which, realistically, the hydro business back then. So, that got shut down, which was discouraging. That was right around when I was coming into the business, just doing, basic kind of, I was a marketing manager in our Northeast region. So this is working with the sales guys who were going down to Home Depot and selling bags of dirt and bags of grass seed. And it was a good way to learn the business, but it wasn't something I felt super passionate about. And over the years in conversations with Jim, he would ask, if you're not kind of fired up about what you're doing in the business, either need to, and he's a pretty direct guy. So he was like, look, you need to stop bitching about it or figure out something that you do want to do that you think will actually be value added for the company. And that's when we started looking at some opportunities and some things that we felt like we weren't good at as a company. And we started off not even really focusing on hydroponics. I was living in Brooklyn with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. And we lived in a little fourth floor walk-up apartment in Brooklyn, and we had plants growing. It's like, man, the products that our company makes for people who live like me, which is a huge portion of the population and growing, these products suck. They're not the right sizes. They're not the right formats. They're clearly not, they're not teaching anyone or making it easy for anyone who doesn't know how to be a gardener to become a gardener. So we started looking at that stuff, and that pretty quickly led us to hydroponics as a technology for those types of potential gardeners. And then that kind of led us to say, man, we talked about this a while ago. Let's dig back into it, look at what the opportunities are. And that's when we started thinking about, if we're going to get into hydro, let's do it in a way that we understand. So let's not jump right into like lights and dehumidifiers. Let's start with plant food, nutrients, and soils and growing media, stuff that we're pretty good at as a company already. That's what led us to the GH and vermicrop deals back in 2014, I suppose. And we've been on a tear ever since.
Yeah, crushing it ever since. At what point? I mean, I this is my personal opinion. You guys are fucking crushing it.
No, I appreciate that. Look, there's some years have been better than others. Obviously, the
Yeah.
whole industry is kind of taken to the shorts this year and has been, I'd say, for the past 18 months or so. And look, as a big player in it and as a public company, I think we get to celebrate our wins more than maybe some other companies, and we have to talk much more openly about our losses as well, which sucks, but it's part of the deal.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. There's more transparency at that level. So when you had that conversation with your dad about, hey, find something that you're passionate about, something that you're fired up about, was Hawthorne already a company, or is that one of those conversations, hey, I want to lead this thing?
Yeah, no, Hawthorne didn't exist. So the idea started off with a concept that just a tiny little team, like 3 people, including myself, called the Rapid Development Team, which was just inside our gardens business here. So our consumer garden business, which is primarily just the Miracle-Gro business. And the idea was, we got a bunch of brand managers and assistant brand managers who were all really good folks, but they're focused on a brand like Miracle-Gro that's worth billions of dollars. And if they've got like an hour in their day, at the end of everything, are they going to spend it trying to build up some little kind of inside our company, some kind of little startup, or are they going to say, look, I'm focusing on where the dollars are, and that's what they did.
Bills.
Yeah, so we said, look, if the only way that we're going to be successful, kind of nurturing and fostering the success of some of these smaller niche businesses and brands, is create a team who's dedicated to helping them grow until they've reached kind of critical mass, and then we could hand them off to the consumer businesses. That was the concept at first. And so that's what we were doing. AeroGarden, I don't know if you're familiar with
AeroGarden. Yeah.
Yeah. So a little countertop, kind of self-contained hydro.
I remember that.
Yeah, like the Keurig machine of herbs and vegetables. That was one of our first investments. That was a business that already existed. So we did that investment. And when we started looking at doing these, real hydro deals for real kind of cannabis brands like GH, we said, look, it's going to have to be a fully dedicated, what we call a BU, a business unit within the Scott's company. But it all came out of, honestly, a conversation I'd had, a lot of conversations with a lot of really smart people. But for me, the genesis was being at a bar with my brother-in-law, my wife's family business, they own a pickle factory.
No way.
Dude, someone's got to make them, right? So, Boar's Head, the deli brand.
Yeah.
So Boar's Head pickles, when you go to the deli and they got a jar of pickles on the counter, that's what they do, is they make those pickles, and they're awesome. My brother-in-law, Ron, is super into just food service. And we were at this bar, and he met a guy from Goose Island Brewery, and they just gotten bought by AB InBev. And we asked the guy, like, hey, what's it like having been bought? Because he'd been at Goose Island before they were acquired. And he was like, honestly, it's not that bad. Like, they've taken some of the stuff that we do, the really high volume beers, and they've moved them to their big manufacturer in Chicago, but they spent a bunch of time here learning how to make the shit right before they took those recipes to the big high volume beer plants. Exactly. Well, what they did was they sent the brewmasters from the AB InBev brewery in St. Louis up to Chicago and said, look, you're going to live there in Chicago at Goose Island until you can make a batch of like their Honkers ale or whatever it was well enough that the Goose Island brewmaster can't tell the difference between his batch and your batch. Once you've achieved that level of consistency, you take that recipe back to the high volume plant, you make the big stuff, and all the weird little beers that we'll make like 1,000 cases of, we're going to keep on making those at our little brew house in Chicago. So he was like, it wasn't bad. They really treated us kind of well. So we took that as a lesson. We went up to Miller Coors also. We had a guy that we were working with at the time who had a good buddy who was working in marketing for Miller Coors craft beer division, which is called 10th and Blake Beer Company, which sounds like a real thing. It sounds like its own thing. Now 10th and Blake is who makes like Blue Moon and a bunch of other beers that have become like really big and famous. But for them, it was their craft division. And we asked them kind of what the whole philosophy was for them. And they said, look, we they were in the same building, and they're like, we want to be in a different building than the rest of Miller Coors, but they wouldn't let us. So we got a few floors that separates kind of corporate from us. They dress differently. They had a different employee handbook, their holiday schedules. I mean, a lot of kind of what feels like minutia they thought about to say, we want to be different. Now, the stuff that's not different was, back of house stuff, accounting, payroll, all that kind of just boring stuff that doesn't matter to a consumer. They leveraged the mothership for all that stuff, but the stuff that did matter to consumers, so the branding, marketing, R&D, brewing new flavors, all that type of shit, they owned. So we just kind of stole that concept and said, okay, we need to create a business around it that feels like it's existed for a while. So that was kind of where Hawthorne came from. And the name was, I'd asked my wife for her thoughts, and she was like, well, shit, I don't really know. And we were out at a dinner with my grandma, Amy, who was my grandpa Horace's second wife. So my grandpa Horace is who founded Miracle Grow. His first wife, my actual grandmother, Peg, was the one who came up with the name Miracle Grow, which, and a lot of people give Horace credit for that, being like the marketing guy. She's the one who thought the name up. Anyway, she passed away before I was born. My grandma Amy is the only grandma I ever had on that side. And we were having dinner with her, and we said, hey, we're doing this thing within the company. And we're trying to come up with a name that sounds like it's got a legacy, that when people hear, they'll be like, oh, I feel like that's existed for a long time, even if it hasn't. And she suggested Hawthorne because it's our last name translated from Dutch into English.
Really?
Hagedorn into English is Hawthorne. Yeah. It's like a shitty thorny bush, honestly, is like what it is.
I've never known that.
Yeah, the Hagedorn bush, which is apparently very prevalent in Holland and other parts of like Northern Europe. That bush, when you translate it into English, is the hawthorn bush.
Huh.
It's like a shrub. So anyway, I thought that was cool. I really like the symmetry of, my grandpa's second wife had come up with the name, where his first wife came up with another really important brand name for us. So yeah, we created Hawthorne. It's a misconception I've seen a lot of, frankly, like out in the industry, is that we bought Hawthorne. We didn't. We created Hawthorne, but Hawthorne was just kind of a shell to place businesses that we did acquire into. So the brand Hawthorne didn't exist until we created it. We populated it with brands like GH, Vermicrop, Botanicare, Gavita.
I almost see it like a General Mills almost. Like a house of brands.
Whether it's General Mills or Procter and Gamble, those companies
B&G.
that have that. And I think there's way, you can look at, a bunch of kind of luxury, LVHM luxury brands now, where it's like, it's not about Hawthorne, and we don't sell a single product that's got a Hawthorne logo on it aside from just on the back. It is for us, it's about the brands, and Hawthorne is just, to your point, is the house for them.
Yeah. So going back to that decision of you running Hawthorne, what was that like? What was that kind of internal conversation between yourself and your wife or girlfriend at the time, whenever that lined up? What was that like?
Yeah, I think we were married when Hawthorne kind of came along as a concept. Well, look, there was the conversation with her, which was, and I feel bad because I've sort of overrun the 10 years I asked her for initially. But I said, look, you got to give me 10 years where I'm going to be traveling a lot, and I'm going to be at work a lot, and I'm going to be away more than you're going to want, or more than I'm going to want. Because, we didn't have kids at the time, we do now. And her and I kind of reached an agreement and said, look, you got to cover me to be able to try to create this thing. Because it's like, we got this window here, and it was a window in terms of our ages, and, not having had kids yet, and where the industry was. It was like, it's emerging from the shadows. And so she said, yeah, I'll give you 10 years where like, I'm not going to like nag you about this shit. You'll have free run, do what you need to do professionally. And she is phenomenal, and I couldn't have done any of this stuff without her support. So she had and continues to have my back on that, despite the fact that it was more than 10 years ago that her and I had that conversation. And so that was the conversation with her, and she's great. And she is in every way my better half. The conversation with my old man was different. And Jim is a super direct, like pretty blunt guy.
I've never met him.
Yeah, no, he's an interesting guy. He would be, I think, an interesting guest on here at some point. You may have to do some aggressive editing because I mean, for however vulgar I might be, he makes me look like a choir boy. But his thing was, look, we believe in the opportunity as a company, or otherwise we wouldn't approve the spend to actually do these deals. But he's like, look, here's the deal. We're gonna give you and the team every piece of support you need, and if you guys fuck this up, like, I want you to know that, like, it's because you fucked it up. That, like, we're gonna remove every possible excuse between you and successfully executing the strategy, which, you know, it can be a tough thing to hear from your pops. To me, it was a good thing to hear, of just like, we're going to get all the support we need. You know, and there was a conversation with our board, which includes family members beyond him. He chairs the board, but his twin sister, Kate, is the vice chair.
He's got a twin sister?
Yeah, well, him and my Aunt Kate are one of two sets of twins in that. Whoa. So there's 6 of them from that, like, crop, or that whatever, that litter. So he's got a twin sister, and they got 2 younger twin brothers. They're all fraternal, so none of them are identical twins. Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot for Horace and Peg at the time to sign up for, and they thought they were having 4 kids, and they ended up with 6. And the 2 sets of twins are within like 2 years of each other.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah, Kate she's a phenomenal board member, just an awesome lady, but she's super intense. So a lot of conversations of we're taking on a degree of risk with the family firm that we haven't in the past. And, like, this shit is no joke. This is not some hobby, like, oh, let's just see if Chris can do it. It's like, we're committing real dollars here, and this must be taken seriously, which of course it was. But yeah, so it was a bunch of conversations, some, you know, more positive and encouraging than others. But look, the reality is, the level of support that I've had, both from, like, my immediate family, I'm talking like my wife, and from the family broadly, and the enterprise, has been, I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, greatly, you know, due to Hollywood doing such a damn good job at creating TV shows like Succession and Dope Sick, where, you know, family-run companies and this. But let's set the record straight. Scott's Miracle-Gro is a family-run business, but it has a board of non-family members. It's a massive company with amazing team members that are from all walks of life, all career paths. It's truly a village that runs this company. But at the core, at the heart of the company, you guys have this family running it. I mean, that's truly special.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's something that, you know, I think is increasingly unique and unusual in sort of the American business landscape, is a business that has been around for as long as ours has. You know, our family's component, if you think of Miracle-Gro as kind of our piece of it, has been around for like 75 years or so now. I think 73. And the Scott's part of the business that we merged with back in the early 90s has been around for over 150 years here in Marysville, Ohio, where I'm sitting right now. So it's a really storied business with a lot of history, particularly here in Central Ohio. And as for the family part of it, yeah, you know, the fact that we've been able to maintain the degree of influence, I wouldn't call it control exactly, because, look, to your point, we are a public company, and this is one of the things, the misconceptions about our business and who we are or are not owned by, they're super frustrating because they're so easily
debunked. Like, just go on the internet.
So easily debunked if people get off their ass and do a little research. Look, I get it. People want to assume the worst. But, you know, I've had this conversation with people before. It's like, look, if you want to attack our company over stuff like any company that's been operating for as long as we have, there have been times where we've had missteps. There are legitimate gripes to have with our corporate history. Like, again, like, I think any corporation, frankly, any person has just made mistakes.
We're flawed human beings.
We are. The idea that, like, we are owned by Monsanto or owned by some fucking global cabal of, like, evildoers, it's like, this is one of, like, guys, we're a New York Stock Exchange company. Our ownership, our cap table is a matter of public record. You can look it up.
Shareholders, Scott's Miracle-Gro. Google it. Look at, you know, majority, like, all the way down.
Yeah, this again is one that I've had this conversation with people before. It's like, look, I get people don't trust me on this topic Because I'll say, no, we don't belong to Monsanto. Like, that's exactly what someone from Monsanto would say, isn't it? It's like, Jesus Christ. Don't trust me. I get it. Don't trust whatever fucking message board you read the bullshit on either.
Yeah.
Be an equal opportunity skeptic. Look the shit up yourself.
Yeah.
And if you do that, if you actually put the amount of effort that I'd hope you not only put into proving or disproving ideas like who we belong to, but in just the political discourse we have in America right now, is like, do your own research. It's all out there. My family owns about 30% of the company. Beyond that, it's a bunch of mutual funds and institutional investors and just retail individual investors who go out and buy shit up with, E-Trade. So but the fact, going back to your original point, that we've been able to maintain the amount of influence we have as a family, it's a really cool thing. And I think it's really well balanced by an independent board of directors some of whom have been around the business for a long time and have a lot of kind of tribal knowledge, some of whom are newer to it and bring fresher perspectives. And that's the obligation you have as a public company, is you have checks and balances in place to make sure that me and Jim don't run wild and do a bunch of crazy shit. We've got people who are there to say
bumper lanes.
Exactly. And it's how any business, I think, ought to operate. The difference in a public company versus a private one is we are obligated to operate this way legally. Whereas in a private company, you can freelance a lot more as just the guy who is the owner operator. You don't answer to anybody except yourself and any other private investors you might have, or your family. Here, we answer every quarter to Wall Street. It's like all of our shit's out there. It's all, like I said, a matter of public record.
Yeah, and it's also becoming more prevalent, I think, to the mainstream people that aren't institutional investors, of what a short seller is, right? And for the people out there that's still not familiar, it's someone who makes money when a stock goes down and not up, right? So we always have to keep that in mind when we read something online, watch something online from a third-party source. What's the motive, right? Where's the money? Follow the money. I mean, that's always going to be there for a publicly traded company.
And candidly, I think less of the bullshit about our company has come from short sellers, I think, than in the case of Hawthorne. I think it's come from competitors. And without naming any particular names, when we did the GH deal, we had a competitor in the nutrient space come out and state, outright lies that are, I think, in a lot of cases, the root of the misconceptions we're talking about right now, where it's just a dude came out and said, just fucking lied about us.
Yeah.
Straight up, to protect his own business. And look, it is what it is. People make the moves they feel like they got to make to protect their business, their employees. And, when it happens enough over a long enough period of time, you stop taking it personally.
That's right. You got to put those blinders up.
Yeah, it's a fucking pebble in the shoe, though. It's just annoying. It's one of those things where it's like, man, again, we've stepped in shit of our own volition before, and I'm sure we'll do it again. And I'll take it on the chin for those things. It's hard to take people just repeating lies to you, and they repeat lies to me about my own family with the confidence of someone who has no fucking clue what they're talking about, but really believes it. That's frustrating, where it's like, dude, I know the answer to this because I sat around the kitchen table where it was discussed in my dad's house. I know the reality here. And I got people who are just like, no, that's not the truth. And it's like, man,
it's frustrating.
I don't know. It is, but
yeah,
look, it is what it is.
There's a lot of important decisions that are made around food. You mentioned the kitchen right now, restaurant with your grandma. Such an amazing thing to be able to break bread and, do business over that. It's much better than a stuffy boardroom.
I would agree with that for sure. Now, look, I know it is put, so I don't report to my old man for a bunch of reasons, both sort of emotional, psychological, and just kind of corporate governance.
Yeah.
Like I said, Jim's a fucking wild man, and having to deal with him, I deal with him plenty in a professional setting now.
I heard he's like a general.
Well, so he's a military dude. He was in the Air Force. He only got to the rank of captain in the Air Force before he retired. But he flew F-16s. I think he does. He
carries
run
that into the business, that mentality, that militant.
For sure, the
tactical
level of aggression. And look, I know that has rubbed people the wrong way. It's like, look, when you strip all this shit away, it's all competing against your opponent and trying to come out on top. So it's regardless of how you phrase it, I think the point that he's making is valid, which is it's all about going up against the other person who's trying to take the shit you're trying to take.
That's right.
And what maneuvers can you make? What decisions and choices can you make or deny your opponent? So again, his leadership style is not for everybody. It's certainly, there are times where I struggle with it, frankly. And I'm grateful that I report to someone else. I report to his number two, who's our chief operator and president. But it does, getting back to the kitchen table thing, we live pretty nearby each other, Jim and myself, and we have dinner. They're very active grandparents, which is great.
I love that.
Yeah, it's super cool, and it's one of those things. It's neat seeing him kind of change gears from like psycho business general.
His
to
heart's
like,
softening, probably.
Yeah, I think he's one where it's like, dude, people don't see him on the weekends, and it's like, as someone who grew up with him, like, he's a much softer dude than he puts on. He probably wouldn't mind saying this on a fucking podcast, but like,
it's all good.
He's an affectionate, generous, kind dude. It's just,
yeah.
That's in his personal life. When he's in his professional life, he's pretty uncompromising. But we have dinner with him a lot just because they adore the grandkids, and we have a good, close relationship with them on a personal level, kind of outside of business. But there are times where he and I will discuss stuff, and decisions will get made and initiatives will get sort of advanced or conceived of on a Sunday night at dinner that, my boss hears about after the decision's been made. And I know that has put him in a weird position before where he's like, dude, like, why the fuck am I hearing about this like after the fact? And it's like, Luke, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, yeah, because we're sitting here. He asked me a question. I answer him
and
on
then,
like
boom,
a Sunday at 7:00.
Sometimes
and then
can't
it's like,
choose.
and he never stops. So it's like, we talk about something at dinner on Sunday night. By Monday morning, and he leaves the house at like 3 a.m. To come to the office. By 3:30, trigger's been pulled, decision's been made and communicated.
So switching gears here, what does your day in the life look like? Are you at the office? You work from home, remote? Are you traveling a bunch still? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it changed with COVID, and some of those changes have been enduring. So before COVID, we moved to Vermont when COVID kicked off. Before that, we'd been in New York. I would work out of that office that I mentioned, the kind of original Miracle-Gro office, which is just a kind of a shitty little office between like an empty lot and a grocery store in Port Washington, just like Long Island suburb. So, I'd worked from home exclusively for like a year when COVID was really going. We took it seriously. And we continue to the extent that like you need to. But, I'm back. I'm here in our headquarters here in Ohio today. I try to spend a day or two a week out here. And then, I try to be on the road a lot. It's one of those things, and I'd slacked off on it for a while. And it was, going through COVID, the entire industry was just out of control. I mean, in like a positive way. And it's taken a turn over the past year, but our business is growing like our business has been growing like 60-70% every quarter, which was insane. And in hindsight, unsustainable. But it made it easy to say, look, everything's going so well. I don't want to go out and get COVID. This was when people were more concerned about than they are now, or at least I was. So I didn't travel that much. I've gotten back into it recently in terms of saying, look, I want to be on the road a couple weeks a month. Not all week, but head out on a Tuesday, come back on Thursday or Friday, like get out and kind of see the realm. And it's really been highlighting to me. I mean, the last trip I did was Southern California, Northern California, and then Colorado and back. And like the industry's changed so much. Just what's working for cultivators and what isn't, has really evolved. I think in some good ways in terms of, it's going to be more efficient. People are learning how to run their businesses a bit tighter, which they probably should have been the whole time. But it's put pressure on people that I do think is unhealthy. And, this is something I've talked about publicly in the past, but like businesses are dying out there.
Yeah.
And the travel, not that I didn't know it already, but it's one thing to sort of hear it in the abstract, to go out and see people who've been out there doing the thing for a long time. We're like, I think
and see it in their eyes.
Yeah, no. And they're like, dude, I'm, I don't know, 2-3 months away from just packing it in. That's brutal.
Yeah. So you're pretty hands-on. I mean, you're going to commercial accounts, hearing their pain points, and being able to go back to the team and make critical business decisions to help them.
Yeah, I mean that's the idea. And I hope that what I'm seeing out there, and I don't do it by myself. I like to go
Yeah,
out
you got a
with people.
team.
And this is a conversation I remember having with the team, with my leadership team at Hawthorne back in like 2015 or so. Was I want everybody look, I have my own personal relationship with cannabis, and I have since I was like in high school. And so to me, having an open door into these facilities and to talk to these folks was like a dream come
It's
true
a
for me.
dream.
So I jumped at the opportunity. For a lot of folks that I worked with who don't smoke or consume cannabis in whatever fashion, to them I was just like, I'm not that interested. I'll go to a hydro store and I'll see what's going on there. I was like, guys, like, and this was a conversation, a directive that I kind of issued to the team was, I don't want anybody here not understanding cannabis. And I'm not dictating to people, you got to start getting high.
You
Like,
gotta
that's
go home
crazy. I'm
and
not going to do
blaze,
that.
bro.
Yeah, everyone's getting a bong. No, it wasn't like that. But it was like, I
Christmas
want
present.
people, whether you smoke or not, I want you to be able to walk through a facility and understand what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And that I want my fucking CFO to be able to call out like a nitrogen deficiency in a plant or whatever.
Damn.
And it was a weird thing for a lot of those folks because they were pretty conservative, born and raised in Ohio.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just, there's, and not that there's necessarily a correlation between being religious and not being a cannabis person, but I think there probably is a correlation there. And it was just a lot of people was like,
morals and customs.
Yeah, and just what you're grown up with and what you're taught as a kid, what's okay and what's taboo, what's dangerous. So for a lot of folks, I think it was a hard adjustment saying, guys, like our whole leadership team is going to a big commercial facility in LA, and we're all going to put on the fucking gown and booties and all the bullshit, and you're going to learn like what makes good weed, what makes bad weed, like how the thing works. So yeah, I try to be hands-on in that part, not only because I think it's valuable, because just, I mean, straight up, it's a fun thing for me. And having been doing it for like 10 years now, like the novelty and excitement hasn't worn off in terms of like, it's like, dude, if you were a music fanatic growing up and it's like, now you get to walk into the studio with rock stars, like I will do that every chance I get. And until they tell me to go fuck myself and close the doors, like I'm going to come visit.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And it's, if you're just looking at the Scott's Miracle-Gro side, are you going to stop at that Home Depot level? Or are you going to go all the way to the farm and see how this helps grow a tomato? What does that cucumber look like before or after? Right? Are you going to taste that produce? Or are you just going to stop at the store and just hope that, a customer comes in when you're there?
Well, and no, I exactly. And I think, I think of this as, my old man has used the analogy of being like a safe cracker. Ooh. Where it's like, you got to really be able to feel like I've never cracked a safe before. I don't think he has either. So I'm not sure where he got this analogy from exactly.
A movie.
But like, probably from a movie. Yeah. But he talks about trying to be a safe cracker wearing gloves. Where he's like, you can't, like, you got to be able to feel every like click of that mechanism, and you need to be totally intimate. Yeah, you got to be dialed into what you do. And I think every step of remove, whether it's I only go to the store or I read about it online or whatever, it's just like all of that is a layer of insulation between you and the people using your products. And I think for every layer of insulation you have, it's just you're a little bit less in touch and in tune with like what's going on. And I don't think anybody benefits from it. I don't, like, not a single person. I get some people are uncomfortable with cannabis. They probably shouldn't work here.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you do, I want you in that facility. I want you becoming passionate at the very least as a service provider. Again, you don't have to be a passionate consumer. I get that it's not everyone's bag. Like, it's mine. And candidly, I think it's a benefit. I think it makes it easier to do the job well. But even if you're not like that, you still got to form a relationship in some capacity, even if it's as an observer.
That's right. I measure it as a spectrum of feedback. It's a feedback loop. The closer you are to your customer, the more in tune you're going to be, right? Well, as many barriers you have in between, you're going to be out of touch. And it might not be overnight. It will happen.
Well, and that's the thing, and it can happen so slowly and so insidiously, and then the next thing you do, you look around and say, "Holy shit, we've completely lost touch with who it is that we're selling these products to, who's using our products." And frankly, this industry, it's like, I mean, look, Hawthorne's a business to business business. And I think it's like, we can't just be thinking about our customers. Like, who are their customers? So our consumers are using our products to create another product. What are their consumers looking for? So
That's
it's like,
right.
what are the end cannabis consumers interested in? And how can we tailor our offering to make it easier for our customers to deliver that end experience? Because if you can't just, this is a long link of chains. We're just at one end of it. And if you just refuse to look at kind of the other ends of that spectrum, I think you're limiting your ability to be a value-added, vendor or provider, whatever you want to call it.
That's right. I mean, much respect to you, Jim, everyone, to be able to be at that level of a publicly traded company and stick your neck out before everyone else at that level. You're a trailblazer.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's, I mean, I'd say the life of a pioneer. I don't know if you were at the right age to play like Oregon Trail
I'm related to Daniel Boone.
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so I'm right there with you, brother.
Yeah, but like, be that life of a pioneer, it can be unforgiving sometimes. And I think, right now with where the industry's at, we're experiencing that. Is we hung our necks out. There's a level of volatility that's associated with this industry that the consumer lawn and garden business just doesn't have, never has, never will, thank God. And I think we're in a position now where it's like, man, it's being a pioneer. It's like right now we're like stuck out in a wagon and it's a snowstorm and we're just hoping we don't have to go fucking down our pass on each other. But
yeah,
it is what it is.
So going into the product innovation, you guys have a lot of technology that are helping growers be the most sustainable growers in the world of any plant, right? We're talking about water usage, energy efficiency, maybe starting with lighting. What does that look like? I remember when I started this company in 2016, I saw Gavita just smashing the market with HPS. They were crushing it. LEDs were not very popular, or maybe there weren't a lot of good cost efficient options, and the technology wasn't quite there. What does that look like for you guys? Helping this industry, literally lifting the bar for everyone. Starting with lighting.
Yeah, look, the lighting thing, innovation there, the R&D work that we've done. Look, Gavita gave us a really great foundation to build off of. Those guys are, we talk about sort of dedication to your craft, really living it. Those dudes are lighting guys through and through. They understand, pro hort lighting, but, plant lighting, I think, better than anyone in the world when we did that deal. And we were really lucky to get the team that came along with it. Now they were, to your point, they were dedicated HPS dudes. And we pushed them on the LED thing. I remember there's a video that a guy who no longer works with us.
Theo? Or...
He took it. What's that?
Was it Theo? I know he was kind of.
So Theo was the dude doing the talking in this video.
I knew it.
It was a guy. It was a guy named Jeff Dobslaw. Jeff,
okay.
If you're listening, you're the fucking man. I miss you, dude. But Jeff Dobslaw, who was part of our diligence team when we were kind of scouting that deal, we were out in the Gavita office in Aalsmeer with Theo and Jair and all those dudes. And we're like, tell us why LED isn't a threat to this business. And Theo went off for like an hour and a half about how LEDs were never going to be relevant. It's just every 5 years, they're 5 years away. It's a bunch of bullshit. And it was just like, oh gosh, okay. It was a rant for the ages.
Oh yeah. I remember him well.
Yeah. Theo, I hope you're doing well. I think last I heard he was at Fluence. So he obviously, became an LED convert eventually. But, so we went up to Harvard Business School and met with a professor up there that was doing some strategy work with us. A really awesome guy named Mike Porter, who is like the godfather of business strategy, and someone I'm super lucky to have had as much access to over the years as I have. And we sat down with Porter and said, dude, this is kind of what we're looking at and he's like, you either need to actually become an innovator or sell the business to them while they're still willing to pay you a good price for it. So I was sitting down with my old man a week or so after that. And he's like, oh, hey, how did that Porter session go? And I was like, well, you're not going to like it. He said we should sell the lighting business. And Jim did not like that that recommendation. Well, and it wasn't that Porter said you should sell. He said you either need to get serious about it or
There's
sell
a
it.
suggestion, you know.
Exactly. And you know, and it took me a while to recognize that the value of that insight that he had, which is you guys aren't taking this business as seriously as you need to. But it flipped a switch for us, and we went out and we hired, one individual who I see is responsible for the lion's share of the innovation we've created, he's a doctor in horticultural lighting. He's a Chinese guy, Chinese American now. He lives here. Him and his wife moved here, but he's, I think, probably the best single lighting engineer in the world. And I'm not saying that like it's hyperbole. This guy is a fucking rock star. And we are really lucky to have him. But he utilized his own knowledge, his relationships in Asia and Europe to give us a really outsized kind of innovation engine. And that's what allowed us to create. And then working with third-party groups who, giant electronics manufacturers who just aren't in this business, but they said they had the capability to take a design that we had and make it at scale efficiently and affordably. So that's really what started with the early Gavita LEDs. And it's grown into, it's our LED business now is bigger than Gavita ever was before LEDs existed. So it's been huge for us. It took a lot of work by a lot of really, really smart people, like I said, that we are super lucky to have on our team.
Yeah, and it's an ecosystem. So one of my favorite parts about the cannabis industry as a whole and hydro, there's all these, really strong partnerships. I think we really encourage it in the cannabis industry. So past the great transition of HPS to LED, what are some other innovations that Hawthorne's been delivering?
Yeah, look, there's innovation all over the place. And look, we're far from the only innovator in the space. There's lots of people out there that are doing really exciting stuff, whether it's on lighting, DHue. We sell a lot of Quests. We don't make Quest ourselves. But we got really great partners there up at Madison Industries and Thermistore who do a lot of really innovative stuff. And, people think of them as just they make DUs for weed grows. Is those guys... Thermistore is Madison Industries is fucking huge. Thermistore is pretty big on their own, and these dudes, when there's a hurricane down in Florida or in Texas or whatever, and they got to dry out a bunch of homes before the black mold grows, these dudes make the equipment that do that. So they're really big, they're really diversified, and they can bring that capability set to bear on this industry in a way that is exciting, because you got a lot of people out there who is I do think it's a tendency of the cannabis industry of growers to say, well, we're going to have to kind of invent the wheel here. And everything that we try out is some cutting edge. And it's most of this shit's probably been tried already in some other industry or in some other part of kind of horticultural or agriculture. So having partners like that, for us, look, we've innovated on growing medias and nutrients in some ways that I think are less exciting and sexy and visible than on the lighting stuff. We bought Hydrologic about a year ago. And we've done some work there, but honestly, that technology, even without innovation work, is already market leading. And that's a skill set. Again, every new kind of product vertical that we've entered has been a learning experience for us outside of nutrients and growing media, because that's something we know how to do internally. So I'd say we're still getting our sea legs when it comes to fertigation, water filtration, that sort of thing, where I think we can make a really big impact. But the thing that's exciting for me, and you mentioned food earlier, is man, we start applying this shit to, the larger
urban
industry beyond cannabis.
Big ag, feeding the world through these
water reclamation, even outside of plant growing, where we're seeing how many manufacturing processes would benefit from if they had really effective, affordable reverse osmosis filtration in their manufacturing process. Could they recapture that water and reuse it in some other way? So we're trying to get much more proactive about saying, how else can we introduce the technology we've been able to develop for cannabis into other either parts of horticulture and agriculture, again, just the broader kind of world. Because these are big issues. Is that you look at cannabis and it's man, I love growing weed, it's great, but it uses a lot of energy, and there's gonna be a reckoning at some point, and you've already seen it in a lot of places where they're saying, look, we're not gonna tell you HPS is outlawed, but we're gonna put energy consumption regulations in place that effectively mean you can't use HPS.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Look, I want to sell HPS, but I totally get that mentality, and I have to imagine the same thing is gonna take place when it comes to water consumption and other things, that municipalities, states, even nations are going to make rules to say, you guys need to be more efficient with this stuff. And I've said this publicly before. I said it at a UN thing back over the summers. We are all much better off if we proactively make these changes. Is we all see the stuff coming. If we wait for someone else to sort of shame us and cajole us into making these changes, then shame on us. It's too late. We look like assholes. We are assholes because we knew that we should have made these changes. We knew we had the technology to do it, and we didn't because we were lazy, or we say, oh, we'll make 3 points less margin selling this other thing. For me, it's guys, this is a really long game here. Like I said, my family's been in this shit for 7 years. We're not going anywhere. And I would much rather, to your point about pioneer, I'd rather pioneer and teach ourselves the lesson instead of being dragged along by some governmental agency. That's just a bad look for everybody.
Yeah. I filmed this facility, Jesse Horton's facility, Loud, out in Portland. And he had this Maya Angelou quote on the wall, when you know better, do better. And I feel like that is such an important aspect when building this technology. You guys could have came in and make more money holding back the line of just selling HPS, but no. You got that feedback loop. You went full steam ahead through LED and other technologies, and it might cannibalize other product lines, right? It might make it obsolete, the other products.
And as for as popular as it is in certain parts of the industry, it's it really feels like it's on its way out rapidly. And and this is relatively small stuff, but reflector sales, selling replacement reflectors, selling replacement lamps, those were all not key parts of the business, but they were meaningful. And you sell LEDs, and it's you're not selling reflectors, you're not selling replacement lamps. But again, you got to take a long-term view of this and try to look out, ideally, over the horizon and say, look, where is this all going? And again, to the extent that we can be a force of good, and look, I don't want to front this is some purely altruistic thing. It's
this
we're
business.
in LEDs, we're in this whole thing to make money, right?
This is
business. And we're a
business.
public company, we're obligated to. But as I think particularly as you see the emergence of the ESG funds and stuff, it's people are paying attention to your environmental impact, your societal impact. And so for us, it's again, I would rather be pointed to as an example of someone doing the right thing than be on the list of these are companies that need to do better.
Right. And you can hit a double bottom line. I mean, look at all industries. Look at tech. Why did Facebook acquire Instagram? Because that's where their customer base was going. Why does GM acquire an electric vehicle manufacturer or ride sharing, this or that, right? You got to be able to see far out and acquire your future base before it leaves completely. And I believe you, your team, your products are in a really unique position here because, and I'm talking the entire company. Look at what's going on in the world right now, just from food sustainability, right? Being able to eat. If we're just looking at a protein problem, not having enough protein, just the most commoditized version of eating in the world, right? You guys can empower that all the way from someone enjoying that one piece of land to grow their own vegetables, their own fruit, their own way to, create medicine, all the way to the big dogs that can help, create that product you're going into your dispensary or your grocery store to buy.
Yeah. I mean, and look, the reality is large scale food, supply chain issues, those are bigger than us. And those are issues that if they're going to get solved properly, we'll play our role. Those are issues that have to be solved by governments and by corporations that make ours look like a little mom and pop business. I'm talking, the Coke industries of the world, $100 billion companies.
Right.
But for us, it's man, if we can be seen as innovators and trailblazers in that space, good. And, when I think about, we going back to AeroGarden, if we can really evolve that technology, because I think for a lot of people, it's you don't go to China, but you go to China and you see that produce in China is fucking dicey. And, you go out and you buy food to feed your family. Yeah. I mean, I haven't spent a great deal of time in mainland China, but I've been there for work stuff. And the impression I got was the local population is skeptical of the local produce because I don't know what this shit's been sprayed with. I don't know where this was grown or what it was grown in. I don't know what kind of chemicals are in this produce. And I don't know if I want to fucking feed it to my kids.
Wow.
And if you could give people the ability and you got to find ways to make it more efficient. But it's like, man, if you could get the ability to grow produce, let's say grow lettuce or grow tomatoes in their own home with something like the AeroGarden, it's like, man, that's the ability for them to confidently feed that food to their family
It's
in a way that they
empowering.
feel comfortable with. Yeah. So I'm getting, it's like, it's kind of grandiose goals, but it is the ultimate, I think, expression of the technology we're trying to develop is let's take it beyond just cannabis and see if we can apply it to a larger problem set and solve more problems for people that are more important, frankly, than people growing weed cheap or growing good weed, as people growing food cheap and good food.
I believe in you. I believe in your team to be able to solve that. Because
Thank you. Look,
we need someone doing that.
Yeah, and look, like I said, it's like, and I don't. This is not like false modesty. I think it's a problem that's much bigger than our ability to solve. But we're going to play whatever role and as big of a role as we can in it. But it's a role. It's it's a problem that's going to have to be a collaborative solution between, like I said, giant companies that make us look small, governments, and individuals, frankly, making choices about where they shop, what they buy, who they're willing or not willing to support. I mean, it is a global problem, and I think it's going to require a global solution that, for us, it's like I said, we're a role player, and we'll try to play our role as well as we can, but it's going to take a lot of collaboration to do this right.
Yeah. I see this kind of outlaw mentality, right? From the growers that were doing everything themselves, the HVAC, the actual cultivating, the trimming, everything, all the way to your company, right? Being able to put products in people's hands to cultivate their own piece of this earth, right? I see a lot of similarities between that mindset of not having to rely on the establishment. And that's a strong bond.
Yeah, no, look, it is for sure. I can't help but be like, man, we're a fucking New York Stock Exchange company. It's like, I do feel it's like we're establishment to an extent. And we certainly catch a lot of shit from people like, oh,
By
fucking,
default.
Big corporates here. Yeah. But look, and this is something I hope we can, like, we chip away at by spending time with people doing stuff like this is, look, we're a public company and it's like, we're not some like wild men, we're a public company in Ohio, but, and part of it goes back to the level of kind of family influence that we have is, I think, more than a lot of companies like us, we have the ability to take some risks, considered balanced, thoughtful risks, but risks nonetheless. And I think it's one where, I think people who've spent time with me, I hope, people spend time with Jim, I think, see that it's like, dude, we are not so different. I've had people give me shit before. It's like, man, we were all out. Like, what were you doing when we were risking our lives and risking our freedom selling weed? And it's like, guys, I was a privileged kid from Long Island, like in high school. So yeah, I wasn't out like hustling in the streets of LA. I can't ever claim that. And I would never try to like posture like I was that guy. Like, I've got that kind of authenticity, that legacy. But we've come in and I think we've kind of hung it out there in our way, which is taken our family, our business, our legacy, our money, and saying, look, we're gonna put it to work in this space, and we're gonna be completely unapologetic about it. We're not going to try to hide it. We're not going to try to act like it's something it's not. In fact, we're going to embrace it. We're going to talk as openly as we can possibly talk about it on earnings calls, on fucking, Fox Business interviews. Is like, let's be honest about this. Let's not talk about tomatoes. Let's talk about what people are really growing.
Yes.
Let's build a facility in Canada so we can actually grow weed. I mean, this is the sort of thing I had to convince people here. We're selling $1 billion worth of weed growing supplies. We weren't doing any research on growing weed. We were just trusting the feedback we got from growers, which matters, and trusting, we'll you test this nutrient on a tomato, and if it grows well on a tomato, it'll probably grow well on a weed plant. It's like, it's not acceptable. We need to be
that feedback loop. You got to touch the plant. You got to be hands in the soil.
Yeah. I completely agree. We talked about, Jim's whole safecracker analogy being from a movie. I've been thinking a lot since I did that last trip out to Cali in Colorado. In Gladiator, in the movie Gladiator, every time before he fights, he reaches down at the soil and he like rubs that shit through his hands.
Like chalk.
Really feel it. Yeah, and just to like feel the ground upon which you're doing battle, and not like, look, I'm a fucking business guy. It's like I'm some like badass gladiator, but it's like, to your point, you gotta sink your hands into it, get your hands dirty, and understand like what it is that people do in this industry, which is not sitting in an office looking at spreadsheets.
Dude,
something to
you
watch.
just gave me an idea for an ad. An NFL player putting chalk on their hands, someone about like to go, catch a ball, or someone about to hit a bar in a gym, someone putting their hands in dirt that's growing, a gladiator from that movie, right? Like it's the connection to the earth that we're deriving value from. It's that
Yes.
connection we're competing on, right? It's something that we all have in common. That
Yeah,
fight.
it's pretty fucking elemental. It's like
Yeah,
if you go all the way back with humanity, it's like we're fucking hunter gatherers, we're
that's right.
gardeners, we're growers. That's this. It's what we do, and whether we're growing one weed plant in our basement or our closet, we're growing 50,000 in a big commercial facility, or we're just growing some veg, whatever it is, or we're growing a business or a family. It's like it is all about getting fucking intimate with something
Yes.
and raising it up. So yeah, I think there's universal truths to a lot of this shit
Yeah.
that we certainly try to embrace in our way.
Yeah. And this Kelowna, is that how you pronounce it? Kelowna
Yeah,
Research
Kelowna. Yeah,
Facility. So
yeah.
is this running the gambit on all your products? Like you walk in, it's a commercial facility, true in nature, but you're doing like trials and split tests.
It's the design inside is different than a typical commercial facility because it's not designed to grow for production kind of volume. So the rooms are smaller because we want to be able to run. It's like, I mean, if you want a proper R&D, you need repeatable kind of scientifically rigorous trials. So I want 10 rooms that run the exact same way so I can run it 10 times. No, it's going to turn out the same way 10 times. So the layout, the design of the facility is different than what you'd find in a traditional commercial cultivation facility. But the idea was that in a smaller format, we can recreate how people are using our products. It's got a full analytical lab. So we're up there. I mean, not only can we run the testing on the equipment, but when they pull down the flower, we can say, okay, we think if we hit a plant with this nutrient package and this lighting spectrum at this stage of growth, that we can amp up its cannabinoid production, or we can impact terpene production a certain way. So we had the ability on site to, again, do all that analysis. So it's a really cool thing. There's a team of really, really kick-ass scientists. I mean, super, super smart people up there that are growing weed in a bunch of weird ways you would never grow it normally. Just because, again,
Stress
there's the
testing.
baseline stuff of like, do our lights run as long as they're supposed to? And what happens if you run them in a room, it gets too hot, whatever. You just baseline product knowledge you want to have. But then it's like, man, like, because we're not grown for production and we don't have to worry about hitting some certain numbers, let's try weird, novel shit with these plants and let's see if we can generate a novel result. The plants are capable of so much more. I was talking to a plant geneticist recently, cannabis geneticist, and what they told me, and I'm taking their word for this, I am no kind of scientist in this way. What they said is that the cannabis plant's capable of producing 30 different terpenes, and it typically expresses in consumer cannabis, you'll see 3 or 4.
Wow.
So, dude, there are strains out there that, or I shouldn't say strains. There's cannabis out there that could be, I don't want to say created. That sounds like too weird and scientific, but like cannabis is capable of being different than anyone has ever seen before or experienced. It's capable of producing terpenes no one's ever smelled before in a cannabis plant.
Woo.
And to me, it's like, man, if we can find
ready
ways to unlock that shit where it's like, you talk about differentiation for a consumer. And again, this goes back to like, we can't just focus on like a hydro shop or even a grow facility. You got to focus on what are people picking up from their local dealer, from the dispensary shelves, like what are they responding to? And it's like, man, if you could make a weed plant that smells like no weed plant, looks like no weed plant anyone's ever experienced before, like that shit gets me super excited. And it's right in front of us. There are people thinking about this stuff, and it's like, man, if we can give them the resources they need to give them that little shove to like get over that, man, like that's the kind of stuff that gets me.
Yes. I can't
really
stress enough. There is not enough research for this plant, right? We do not have the government, the school system, right? The university systems on board with this. So what you guys are doing, it's novel, right? There's not a whole lot of people doing. I know there's pockets around the world, like Mississippi had something. Israel's been doing something, but
could you even call what they were growing in Mississippi?
No,
weed?
It was stress. It was
garbage.
Swag. Yeah.
But because just as a consumer, it's like, dude, I want to see what's coming next. And you talk about, how little we know about the plant. I mean, how many active compounds are exist in a cannabis plant? Like 200 plus.
Yeah.
We have a fucking rudimentary understanding of 2.
Delta 9.
THC and CBD.
Yeah.
But all the CBG and THC
Look at
and all this
Delta
weird
8
shit
blowing up recently, right? There's so much uncovered.
Yeah, so it's like and look, all of this we're going down a rabbit hole on this, but it's something that matters. Is like you talk about consumer education when it comes to consuming cannabis. And it's like everyone's talking about potency, THC percentage. People are talking about indicas and sativas still. And it's like all of this bullshit that people have come to believe about weed, where it's like, guys, and it's like, oh, one makes me, indica makes me sleepy. And it's like, no, they don't. Like, we don't know all the things that factor into how this plant affects us, how different versions of the plant affect us in different ways. Or even even the same plant affects different individuals with different endocannabinoid systems differently.
Yeah.
There's real work to be done, not only from an agricultural perspective and a plant perspective, but from a biomedical perspective that, like, I don't even think we've scratched the surface on yet. And this is like, and I know people lament the idea of big pharma getting into this, but it's going to take pharma getting into this for us to really understand the potential of the plant. And for all the people in this industry who talk about, cannabis and CBD like it's some cure-all, and it's like, look, I love weed. It's fucking great, and it is like my substance of choice. But it's not what a lot of people say it is. At least we don't know it, and we can't prove it, and we don't have any evidence to say whatever ails you, it'll help you with. And I think it's like, I think a lot of that talk, frankly, does a disservice to the industry, because it's like, it just doesn't sound believable, because it's not. It's snake oil.
Yeah.
But there are real legitimate benefits to this plant. It's capable of doing things that we don't understand yet. And the sooner I think those big players can get into it, because no one is going to have the resources to unlock that knowledge but those guys. Like them or not, they can do things that no one else can.
They're set up. And I think
it's like, yeah. And again, if the industry can build relationship with pharma, and look, it may not be possible, because those dudes are they're monsters. I don't mean that in like a negative way necessarily, but they're big and they have different priorities. But if we could harness someone there in the way that I like to think that we've been harnessed, as like a force to support the industry and to drive it forward in some ways
from within.
Yeah, if we could find an ally in a pharma, the industry, I mean, like I think we could see really exciting stuff done. But it's going to take a concerted effort, and it's going to take people not being like protectionist.
Yeah.
Not saying, fuck you, this is my precious little industry and I don't want you coming in. As guys, this whole thing is changing and evolving, getting bigger and more complex. And if we really want the plant to become everything it could be to consumers and to patients,
gotta open up.
It's going to take letting those people in. And to the extent that we can control it, let the right ones in and let them in the right way, cool.
Yeah.
But if you keep it to ourselves, we're limiting the potential. And I don't think that's the right thing.
Yeah. You want to know what my dream is? I want to do a 23andMe test. Saliva, whatever it is. I want to know exactly how this plant modifies my body, my mind, everything. And I want to have a product derived from that test. A product of one, party of one. I mean, everyone loves
totally
to share
it to you.
Yeah. I want a pen. I want to, maybe it can't be a flower, but I want to concentrate, an edible, a drink. I want something that's tailored towards my endocannabinoid system, that's not going to have me feel all these crazy, kind of overdosing paranoia, this or that sometimes happens, unfortunately, because it just, when you pass it, right, it doesn't impact everyone the same. And it's holding the world back, I think, when we can contain it and build it for you.
I totally agree. And I was talking to a guy who I will leave nameless, because I think he values sort of discretion and anonymity. He's not an anonymous dude. He's relatively well known in the cannabis industry, but I'm not going to bring up his name. But if he's listening, he will know that I'm talking about him. Who believes? I mean, he grows the best weed that I've ever had the pleasure of getting to experience.
I need to know this guy now. off the interview.
I'll tell you about him offline. Yeah. But and look, I've had the privilege of getting to experience a bunch of different weed from a bunch of different places. This guy is, in my opinion, on a level of his own. And he's talking about, he's like, dude, in the future, we're going to be like a terpene manufacturer, because people are going to be getting specifically tailored, like biosynthetically derived cannabinoids that not just for you, but for you and the specific mood that you're looking for.
Yes.
Where it's like, I'm going for a hike, where it's like, okay, we got exactly the stuff for you for that upbeat, like energetic experience. But it's like, oh no, but you're going to want something different for, this is your like nightcap session. So he's convinced, he's like, terpenes will play a factor in that, but it's going to be, again, biosynthetically derived cannabinoids in very specific personalized ratios, underpinned by cannabinoids for whatever entourage effect turns out to be. Again, got to research that. There's a bunch of shit we think we know, we don't actually know. So yeah, he's one of the smartest dudes I know in this industry, who's like, that's where it's going. I don't know if I'm just clinging to the past. I'm a flower guy.
Me too.
I really enjoy smoking flower. The idea of this going in some weird, like, technological, dystopia where it's like we're all just using our little like thing to like I will miss the ritual, I guess, and the whole experience that I grew up with and building that relationship. Yeah, breaking up flour, however you roll in something, packing a bowl, whatever it is. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. At least it won't for me. And I think there's a group of consumers out there that are going to cling to that. But I mean, we've already seen with the growth of extracts, with pens in particular, and edibles, is there's a lot of people out there who don't want to smoke anything. They're down to get high. They just don't want to smoke something. It doesn't align with their own kind of personal health values. So I think for folks like that, and I'm sure for the rest of us, it's like if they're like, no, Chris, seriously, this is going to be like the best fucking weed experience you ever had, I'm sure I will embrace it. But it seems like there's a point where it gets too high tech.
Yeah.
Where it's like, fuck, I just want to go back to rolling a joint like the old days.
Yeah, it geeks me out just thinking about the future, and I'm right there with you. I mean, I always want a little old with a little new. It just depends on where you're at and, what you're doing. But there is a very strong ritual feeling that bud in your fingers, smelling it, breaking up that jar, that pack.
I mean, look, it's being beautiful. Up in Vermont now, it's been taken away from me a little bit just because, like most of my buddies and stuff are in New York. But when someone comes up or I'm down there, I mean, just the ritual. And again, I'm so fucking lucky to get to travel around and to meet people and to get like really great flower from kind of all over the place, and sitting down with the homies around a table and just opening up like a bunch of jars of like really different weed, where it's like, oh, this one's like super gassy. This one's got like that roadkill kind of skunk vibe, or like the super citrusy candy ones. It's like, that to me, like that's the whole thing. That's what all of this is. It's like people sitting around and saying, oh, just wait and try a glass of this wine, getting into the cellar.
It's the like, chef's table experience.
Exactly. And this idea that it's all going to just be, a pack of Marlboro joints and it's just about getting high. It's like, man, like, what a fucking shame if we allow that as the industry. If that's and I know that's going to be a big part of the consumer base, is people like, I remember reading something about Willie Nelson, some interview in like High Times, like, Willie, what's your favorite strain? He was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, a guy just gives me a Tupperware bin full of weed. Weed's just weed to me.
I think I know that guy.
I know there's a bunch of people out there just weed's weed. I get high. It is what it is. To me, it's like, it's all about that. I'm talking to a board member. It's like, you find your flavor or whatever. You just want to have that. It's like, no, I want as many different jars of really good weed as I can possibly get my hands on. That's what I want. Just, I would imagine, I'm not a wine guy. I'd imagine like someone with a big wine cellar is like, you may have an extra case or two of your favorite wine, but beyond that, it's like, you want diversity. You want as many really good bottles as you can get your hands on and cycle through them. Like that's the experience to me.
You know what's really trippy? When you open up a bag and your olfactory bulbs bring you back to a memory of a cultivar that you smoked very similarly to that smell. That just happened to me last week. I was just transported to smoking over, like back home. We like went over this bridge and then went longboarding in the middle of the night, and I just boom, back to that moment. It's trippy. It's like a time traveler.
I had a really similar experience where when I went to college in Maine, and the weed that we were getting up there at the time, and the main industry has evolved a ton. This was back in like 2005, before there was any kind of legal market there. But occasionally some really good weed would come through, and there was a batch of Northern Lights that I ended up having to flush down the toilet because we'd had a party in our dorm room, and like, campus security showed up, and he was like, "It fucking reeks in here."
Who's
like,
smoking weed in here?
Well, he was like, "Give me the weed right now, or I'm just gonna call Brunswick PD, like the actual cops, and they're gonna show up here with a dog." And it was like, well, fuck. And we flushed it, and I remember vividly to this day the campus security guy, as the last big bud like circled the drain. He was like, "Oh, that's a nice looking bud." And it's like, man, fuck you, dude. Anyway, it had that really distinct kind of sharp Northern Lights smell. And yeah, I came across some weed recently that was like, and yeah, it was just like you said, it's like you hurtle back through time, and it's like back, 15 years to a dorm room in Maine. And it's just like, it's an exciting thing. It's something that, look, people who don't like weed, I get it. They don't like weed. Like I part of me wishes they would, cause it's like, man, like this is
it's
something,
magical.
And I'm sure people, it's a fucking special thing. And it can be, I think, an enhancer of your life in a lot of different ways. I don't want to sound like some horrible, like intoxication advocate or something, but I've talked to people where it's like, dude, honestly, I think it makes me a better husband, a better father. It's like, taking one hit before I go read to my kids at bedtime.
Yeah.
It makes me so much more patient, so much more engaged, so much more willing to like go down these weird paths that like a 5-year-old wants to go down.
Your brain's
I'm not
just
focused
there
on whatever bullshit I was doing in the office all day. I'm just with them. I'm focused on the story I'm telling them, I'm making up, or that I'm reading, or the questions they're asking me. And that's something that's like, I got no shame in saying like, no, it allows me, it helps me to be better. And that's one where it's like, I don't know if I'm a sort of pseudo medical user because it's some kind of therapeutic thing for me, or just like, no, it just like, it smooths out those rough edges you have after like a tough, stressful day, and someone says, no, I have a glass of scotch, I have a glass of wine, whatever. It's all part of that thing. But it is really effective for me, at least. And I think for a lot of people.
Our body and mind will thank us in 20, 30 years of not having a nightcap and having a night smoke. It refreshes. It's a great way to decompress. And I honestly think I'm the best possible version of myself, right? I'm not, going through and getting couch locked 24/7. I have a business to run just like yourself. But in those moments, right, it just makes you a better person. It really does.
Yeah, no, I remember reading like, I think it was a Seth Rogen quote, and he was talking about, I think it was when they made Pineapple Express, and they're like, are you actually smoking weed on set? And he's like, we're not smoking weed on set, but he's like, here's the reality in Hollywood. And I think, and I suspect in a lot of other places, is everybody smokes weed. The people, and he was like, we had some people that were rushing home off, like from work, because they weren't comfortable getting high in their trailer or whatever. And he's like, for those of us that were like, that it doesn't phase us to be high. It's like, yeah, like we would get high on set, not while we're filming, not like on screen, on camera. But he was like, yeah, it's just like, it allowed us to make a better movie. And so he's one of these guys who, the impression I get, I don't know the dude, I've never met him, is he legit, he smokes all day.
Yeah.
Like he's no joke. He's like Snoop in that regard, where it's like, no, this is not some put on. Like they legitimately are just getting high all the time. They can function that way. I can't. To your point, like, yeah, having a business, like I'm not getting high during the day, during the week, like obviously. But once it's time to like read to the kids, once it's time to like lay down and watch a movie with my wife, like, fuck yeah. Because it makes life a little better. And in this day and age, like who couldn't use that?
Right. And, bring it back to Steve Jobs, right? He was very into psychedelics, not just cannabis, shrooms, acid, everything. It helped him become one of the best minds in the world at what he was doing. And he was still running a huge company that became public and this and that in his later years. So I don't see why we can't now, right? Like we can still innovate and create companies, and what we do in our personal life can help fuel that.
Look, I think the reality is, I think for a lot of the professionals out there making like big moves, not in the weed business, just in normal kind of mainstream industry, it's one of those things. As I grew up and I became, as I became an adult and as I had kids and, was talking to other parents and stuff, you realize, even just talking to my own parents and realizing, oh shit, like when my parents would bust me in high school and like find a bag of weed in my room and they're like, we're throwing this out, Chris. They didn't. They're like, oh no, that bong that we got out of your room, we use that thing for the next 10 years. That was like, it was great. So you realize like, oh no, all these like normal people, it's like they get high. And I think there's a generational aspect of having the shame about it. And so I have to hide this behavior. And it's a challenge as a parent now of like, how do I treat cannabis with my kids? So we got 5 and 7-year-old kids, and I don't want to make it some weird thing that I'm hiding from them. I don't want to be, gross about it either. So it's a balance, but I think there's a generational aspect where a lot of the people that do believe it's a problem, it's something to be ashamed of, it's something to be avoided. I think a lot of those people, frankly, are getting older and dying. And I think once that generational shift is really complete, I think we'll see a lot more openness about consuming cannabis, kind of however you decide to consume it. But right now, there's still just that taboo. And you look at all the numbers where it's like people talk about, like, what percent of Americans smoke weed, American adults. And it's like 12%. It's like, I don't believe that number for a fucking second. I think it's way higher, but I think people are uncomfortable answering honestly.
Yeah.
Even if it's some anonymous survey, I think people still feel this weird shame and guilt. I look forward to people getting over that, but it takes time.
It's going to be in everything. Do you think at that point, whenever it happens, the U.S. is poised to do it better than Canada and do it better than anyone else?
I fucking hope so, dude. Canada's been a disaster in terms of, look, I give them credit for getting federal legalization done, but like, I don't think anyone would say that legalization in Canada has been a success. The rollout has been horrendous. I think and people have lost, in some cases, billions of dollars. I'm talking as sort of a big corporate, look at Constellation, they've got completely fucked. But a lot of people have lost their life savings trying to invest in this industry, trying to build a business in that industry up there. And frankly, the same thing's happened here. I think that the U.S. has an opportunity to do it better. If I look at individual states that have done it, I can't say I'm super encouraged, because every state seems to try to do it fresh. And it's like, guys, the wheel's been invented here. Places like Colorado, California, they have, Michigan, they've made laws, they've realized their mistakes, they've modified them in some cases more successfully and more decisively than others. But I think, again, it's like you look at it, it's like, man, like New York's out there doing their thing now. They I think are making some mistakes. It makes me anxious. And if, again, to sound like a pessimist, look, I think they have the opportunity to do it better. I think the United States federal government's had the opportunity to do a lot of things better. And I think they've fucked a lot of those things up. And now, look, I don't want to sound like I'm not a proud American. I am. And, I remember, I think it was a Winston Churchill quote where he said, America has the best system of government in the world, or excuse me, the worst system of government in the world, aside from all the others. And so it's like, I love this country and I love the industry that's being allowed to grow here. Do I think they're going to fuck up legalization in some capacity? Absolutely. I have zero faith they'll do it smart at the outset. I just hope they can fix it quickly. So we'll see. I'm, like I said, cautiously pessimistic.
Yeah. And I think to a certain part, when it comes to media, like entertainment type media, we need a connector. We need a global connector that helps us end that stigma and gets that final 60, 70% to the 80% mark. And I truly think, wishful thinking, that at that point, it's going to be our tipping point. And it's like, we can't put the genie back in the bottle.
No, look, I think we're close, when you see, dudes like Elon Musk smoking on Joe Rogan's podcast, like stuff like that, where it's like
snippets.
I think
though. We need
it's just these little things, and it's just like, if someone were to come out and say, can we like cut out the bullshit here about this plant, about this substance? And there's people out there who have that level of influence. People who can reach, 300 million people with a tweet or an Instagram post, and it's like, if those people would pick this thing up and actually make a point of it, I think it could move the needle. But they got other interests they're looking after right now. So I think right now it falls, I say, broadly on kind of the royal us of the industry to say, let's make it as unthreatening and sort of non-scary as we possibly can. I think there's parts of the industry where it's like they want to keep it like old school, and it's like, that's gonna freak normal people out. We got to make cannabis normal. I think it's the only way.
That's the campaign slogan, man. Make cannabis normal. I like it.
Well, isn't that the weed?
Well, there is a normal, like missing a vowel or something. There's the normal organization, of course. But like Make America Great Again, make cannabis normal. We're just so close. And I want it. You want it. We all want this, right?
Yeah, we'll get there.
We want to feel like we can just go outside and be ourselves and not casted down upon in society. And we want to be able to be a father that consumes and not be vilified.
Be an entrepreneur that consumes, where it's like, it's like I'm not sitting in a basement like eating fucking Doritos at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's like I'm out doing my thing and hopefully creating, maintaining jobs and building, being part of the community. And again, when you strip all that away and you get to know someone, you make some new friend. It's like, oh, this guy's really got his shit together. And then it's like, no, he smokes weed. Of course, because everyone does.
Yeah.
But everyone feels like it's this shameful thing where it's like, this is not some like fetish that you need to be ashamed of, and not that you should be ashamed of whatever your fetish is, but it's like, this is a pretty standard behavior.
Yeah. We got to will it.
For some reason, it still has this tint that people are uncomfortable with. So
we are so close, my friend. Yeah. We will manifest this, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years in our lifetime.
Hey,
we will get it done.
Here. I hope you are too.
Absolutely. I will be here. And,
hell yeah.
Going back to the business and the brands and the products, when I was building this company in 2016, I was in college, and I, started hearing about kind of the Hawthorne and the General Hydroponics and the Botanicare and the Gavita, one acquisition after another. It was just grade A. Like, it could not have been better. Every single acquisition is like the best brand at the best time, the best sector. How the hell do you do it?
Oh, dude, look,
it's masterful.
Look, I appreciate you saying that. Honestly, so there's a dude who I will name here. He's much more publicity friendly. This dude named Ross Haley. Ross was, So Ross was running GH and Vermicrop when we bought those businesses. And it's, someone I saw when I was out in California a couple of weeks ago. Someone I consider a personal friend, and someone I really look up to in terms of what he's been able to accomplish in his own career. Dude came up selling fucking vacuum cleaners door to door in Alaska.
He was doing
like
Kirby, like in Alaska?
Yeah.
Dude, I did not know that.
No, the guy's a maniac. So just the level of hustle that he has is pretty unparalleled, and he's still doing it big time. A huge part of our kind of, our M&A plan came straight from Ross, and it was just dudes he was homies with.
Damn.
He just had this in his own head when we did the deal. He said, Ross, if this works, like, what's next? And he was like, I have a whole blueprint laid out for you. So we looked at it and was like, oh, this actually is pretty good. And so we ran the play. And, obviously it's evolved since then, but a lot of it was sitting down with, and it was, okay, Ross gave us the list. We do a deal.
Entourage effect, baby.
It's like, yo, help. Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like, hey, this is Ross's plan. Do you buy it? And they would say, yeah, but maybe let's think about this one instead, or that one, or change the phasing, change the order that you do the deals. So a lot of it has been, we're not buying hurting business. We're buying good, strong businesses with really smart people.
They are number 1s and 2s in the top sectors.
Yeah. So it was just, let's take as much possible knowledge and sort of strategic insight and, industry, history and all that. We can absorb all that. We bought that knowledge. And it's like, you're not just buying a brand. You're not just buying a set of products. You're buying access to those people's brains. And that was a big part of it for us.
That's right.
We can't get delusional about who we are. We're never going to have, now look, we're getting there where we've got our own experiences we've built. But for a long time, it was, look, we're the new guys on the block. The only way for us to make a smart plan that someone who's been here forever would have is to ask them to make it for us or with us. And that's what we did.
Damn. I love that. I have never heard that before. In my head, it's like, oh, they have a 30-person team of, doing due diligence and, this and that. I'm sure they're helping execute.
No, we had a bunch of people doing diligence and making sure like these dudes haven't cooked the books or whatever. But no, the blueprint was, we said, okay, if nutrients and growing media deals work for us, we'll expand and we'll look at some other categories beyond what we do. But that's as far as we went. And then it was, once we get these people in, is, hey, let's sit down and just whiteboard this out for a couple days and see kind of what comes out. And it was honestly I've got these presentations from back in 2014, 2015 that lay out exactly what the next 4 years were going to look like for us. And we stuck to it. And it worked.
Wow.
So
what's your personal favorite deal? If you can, what was the one that maybe you were super aligned on, you went all in on, and you're just like, we flawlessly executed?
Look, there's, I'm a self-critical person. I think there's in every deal we've done, there's things that we could have done differently with hindsight. That being said, there's two that stand out for me, and they're kind of the first two. I don't know. The GH and vermicrop deals, which were kind of connected, that was our first. So everything was new, and it's just, there's no replacement for that level of excitement of just like, holy shit, like I've never done this. I'd never done a big deal before. I had never, led a deal team, certainly not in this sector. So that was just, there was an excitement there where it just felt so just exciting. After that, the next deal we did was Gavita. That was a deal where it was a long and tough deal to execute. We spent a ton of time in Europe. So we'd fly over on a Sunday night, work the deal, 18, 20-hour days in law firm conference rooms, working with Dick and Sven, trying to get that deal done, fly back on Friday evening. And you could fly back from Schiphol back to JFK. You'd leave at it was a 5:30 departure. And with the time change, you'd land at 7:30 in the evening. So it's a really long day, but you get home, you have dinner with your family, you spend 36 hours at home, and then you fly back on Sunday night. So that was one where it's it was so intense with that deal team that I kind of treasure that memory of just being in Amsterdam with these people, and you're working so hard, and those couple hours you have free or just you go out and have fun. That was really special. And then the Sunlight deal, which was kind of the big kind of
brought it all together
platform deal that pulled it all together, working with, Craig and Doug Hargraves, the guys who started that business, and the team that they built. Cause that was just that was when it really became a serious,
that was the biggest
business.
Acquisition for you guys. That was how much did that close at?
Biggest, $450 million. Biggest deal Scott's has ever done still.
Woo!
Yeah. So that was a big one. No, and that was one, I don't mean to talk out of school about other people's business, but I remember I was walking to dinner with Craig Hargraves, a guy who started
out of Vancouver.
Sunlight. Yeah, we're in Portland. But yeah, out of Vancouver, and I was walking down the sidewalk with him the night that our deal closed and the money was wired. And that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, was a dude who had been busting his fucking ass for 30 years, who'd crushed it. I mean, crushed it. And seeing the moment we were walking down the street in Portland, and he got a text from, I don't know, from his banker or what, saying the money just hit your account, and seeing the look on his face. And it was an interesting, because it wasn't all joy. There was a bittersweetness, I think, to it, of just this thing that he's built. It's like marrying off your daughter, it's this thing that I put all my whole life into is gone. It's someone else's now. But seeing the look on someone's face who had finished the race was a really cool thing to get to be next to and to get to be part of. So they've all had different things, but
gives me chills.
I would say those three are the three that really stand out.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have been a bystander. I have been a fan, on the sidelines. I met Ross at a Sunlight buying show. This is 2016. I'm at a dinner with the who's who at the table. I'm some young 23-year-old kid that no one knows who I am. I'm just sitting there, just kind of, consuming game and learning from these greats, and just admiring the fact that they built something, that they exited, they crushed it. And then fast forward, and that was a crazy night, of course, with those guys. And then fast forward, I'm at a club in Vegas during MJ BizCon with the entire Gavita crew. They have 4 tables, and I'm at the table right there, right after they exited with Dick, Jair, Sven, all those guys. And
was Twan there?
Yes. The whole the whole
that
crew,
guy is a
bro.
fucking maniac.
Yes.
Yeah,
the whole crew.
I know the crew.
And they were just celebrating like the world was going to end the next day. Like just literally that energy has followed me from those moments. And there's many others.
It's intoxicating.
But it's intoxicating, literally and figuratively, because they party hard.
Yeah, they do.
But just being in those rooms, and I'm going to take it back even personal. I don't even know if you remember this one because we didn't really talk, but the Hawthorne parties that started happening, like the MJ Biz parties, right? It's our homecoming, and there's one year, all my years, you know, kind of melt together.
Yeah,
but
they blur a little bit. Yeah.
There's one year, I call it like the hippie mansion. It was kind of off the strip. There was a dab bar.
That house party,
the
like
pool,
10 minutes out of town.
Yes, dude. And you came over. That. You were wearing a hoodie, sat at the table. I'm sitting there, you know, eating, drinking, whatever. And you were just the chillest guy, just sitting there having a good time, just kind of like sitting back, watching, you know, the whole family have fun. And I'm like, this is my industry for the rest of my life. Like I feel it to my bones. And just being around all those people, including yourself and the lives and worlds that have been impacted. It's incredible.
No, it is. And that party, you know, they gotten bigger and more elaborate.
Yeah.
That was the first one we threw.
Oh, really? That was the first?
And yeah, that was the first one. And honestly, it's still my favorite.
That was my favorite.
It felt like a fucking souped up, like high school house party. It was like, it was
a family reunion. Great time.
And yeah, exactly. And, you know, we had, you know, Devin was inside making all the infused food.
Yes.
Running the dab bar and the whole thing.
Wow.
And fire dancers and shit. Yeah, that was, really, really fond memories.
It was the first time in my life that I have been at a party where I feel like every single person was cut from the same cloth, right? We all believed in this plant. We were all celebrating the successes and having an amazing time. And it's like, where else does that exist? You know, just people crushing it in every single vertical sector, growers, equipment, hydro, etc. It felt great. So
I agree.
Thank you for putting that party together and the team that put all that together.
No, it is, dude. Like, honestly, and this is not just like something people say, like, it is my pleasure. Like it's something that I feel super privileged and lucky to get the opportunity to do. It's crazy that I've been given this opportunity, it feels. But, you know, we take it seriously and try to sort of live up to the opportunity that's been put in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And forward looking here as we wrap up, you work with your brother. His name's Nick as well. Yeah. And you work with your father, you got your aunt, you got multiple family members. What does that future look like for you guys? You know, is Hawthorne, I know you guys have some stuff with Riv Capital going on, and I'm curious, you know, you don't have to name out like sectors or exact companies that you're looking to acquire, of course, but what does that next 5-10 years look like?
No, you know, we look at the whole thing. You know, the Riv thing is exciting, and what it comes down to is we see it, and despite what's going on right now in the kind of North American cannabis market, and it's rough, it's brutal. There's a lot of people going out of business, and I'm grateful and feel super lucky we have the support that we do of the bigger corporation to kind of keep us going. Long term, man, there's so much opportunity here. I can't help but think that consumer-facing cannabis brands are going to be like the single most valuable thing. I think it's very obvious that they will be, and maybe already are. So to me, that's the future. That's the next step. And that's where we can take the experience that we've built and hopefully the relationships we've built over the past 8 or 9 years here and leverage them to apply the resources to an even bigger opportunity. Look, I'm not the talent. I'm not the guy who knows how to grow really great cannabis. I I mean, I know it when I see it. I know it when I consume it. But just being look, I'm the guy who I understand kind of large scale logistics. I understand, financials and how to work public markets and all that sort of thing. And going out and working with people who can do the other thing, who can just grow and brand great weed. I think that's a really exciting opportunity to say, how can we bring those dudes into new markets, primarily, I think, on the East Coast, and give them the opportunity to just do what they do in some of the most competitive markets, whether it's LA or Northern California or wherever, and run that same skill set in a place where the competitive landscape is very different and consumers don't have access to the same kind of products that people do in more developed markets. I think that's a big opportunity. And so when we think about how we can expand, that's the stuff that kind of gets me fired up. I know it's what gets Jim fired up. My brother, my Aunt Kate, my cousin Jordan. I mean, we got a bunch of family members in the business, pretty much all of whom are focused on this part of it. So look, we talked about, in 15 years or whatever, it's like, we're going to be here. We're going to be doing our thing. And I hope we can continue to carve out a space that's not only productive for us, for the shareholders and all that stuff, but actually, helps to look. And I don't know if making the industry better is like too sort of, there's too much hubris in saying that, but like doesn't make it worse. And I think as sort of as low a bar as that sounds, I think in a lot of ways, it's like, if we can be a corporate player in the industry who just doesn't fuck it up and have a negative impact, I think that maybe is kind of a victory. So we're going to be around. We're going to be participating here in one way or another for as long as I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. So,
well, I'm here for it. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
So much for your time today. It has been a
thank
dream.
You for the opportunity. It's good to talk.
Yeah, it's been a dream of mine to finally chat with you and learn from you. And looking forward to the future.
Fuck yeah. All right. Good stuff, man. Thank you.